CBS News, as you know, has lost one of its brightest lights. 60 Minutes correspondent Bob Simon died last night in a traffic accident in New York City. He was being driven in a Lincoln town car that collided with another vehicle, then ran into the median barrier. Bob was 73 years old.
CBS News President David Rhodes said in a statement, Bob Simon was a giant of broadcast journalism and a dear friend to everyone in the CBS News family. And 60 Minutes executive producer Jeff Fager said Simon, quote, escaped more difficult situations than almost any journalist in modern times. Bob was a reporter's reporter. He was driven by a natural curiosity that took him all over the world, covering every kind of story imaginable.
Bob Simon spent more than 47 years at CBS News. He received dozens of awards for his reporting and earned the respect and admiration of his colleagues and world leaders. As a globe-trotting foreign correspondent, Bob Simon cut a striking figure. His assignments, thousands of them, took him to far-flung corners of the earth. But it all began in Vietnam.
We're going to pick up an American. All we know about him is that he's at Firebase Andrews and that he's been hit by shrapnel.
A war Simon covered for much of the 1970s. He was on one of the last American helicopters out of Saigon.
President Assad's tough statement warning Israel against military intervention was not taken at face value in Jerusalem.
Simon was named chief Middle East correspondent for CBS in 1987, reporting on conflict in the region for over 20 years. He witnessed Egyptian President Anwar Sadat's first visit to Jerusalem.
Will miracles never cease?
Covered Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin's assassination.
Sadness beyond words.
And during the Intifada, he and his crew captured a brutal beating of two Palestinian teens with the use of a telephoto lens. It was a powerful image of the conflict.
This seemed cold, deliberate, methodical. It went on for 40 minutes.
Never one to shy away from war zones, Simon covered the opening days of the Gulf War in 1991. But he ended up being part of the story when Iraqi forces captured him and his three-man crew. For 40 days, they were imprisoned, beaten, starved, and threatened with death. He spoke about it with Ed Bradley.
Just changed you?
Yeah.
How?
I don't know. Too early to tell.
Anyone who watched Simon's work on 60 Minutes and 60 Minutes 2 knew his range as a reporter, his skill with storytelling, and the grace of his words.
Before long, Armand's house became a makeshift conservatory. Armand was the dean. Every room, every corridor, no matter how small or dark or stifling, was teeming with sound.
He helped us to understand the language of elephants.
These fearsome noises are actually elephants greeting one another. Glad to see you. Come a little closer.
And took us back to the nuclear calamity at Fukushima.
The disaster seems to have stopped time. The clock shows 2:46, the moment the earthquake hit. And the damage to shops and homes looks like it could have happened yesterday.
He showed us the world through the eyes of Sudan's lost boys.
When they saw their villages burning, they started running. Streams of boys became rivers. Hundreds became thousands until an exodus of biblical proportions was underway.
And made us comprehend the enormity of the massacres in Srebrenica.
This is where the bodies are stored, more than 1,800 of them. A small fraction of the missing, but more than any morgue on earth could handle.
Through it all, Simon, the winner of 27 Emmys, had a voice unlike anyone else. At the time of his death, he was working with his daughter Tanya, a 60 Minutes producer, on a report about the search for a cure for Ebola. Bob Simon is also survived by his wife Francoise, his son-in-law Dr. Evan Garfine, and a grandson Jack. He was 73 years old. What you see there is what a reporter's life can be.
Yeah.
And how you can use the tools of your own intelligence and your heart, and your pen and your camera, to take us to the front lines of conflict and to remind us of what the human spirit can be, because he could touch it with those stories of elephants and symphonies, but also the stories of life and death.
And he had such a quick sense of humor. I certainly didn't know him very well, but we were leaving a luncheon last month, and we were both leaving at the same time, and my car was there, and I said, would you like a ride? He said, sure, and he got in, and he said, kid, I got to tell you, I was flattered that he called me kid, number one. But he said, I've been watching what you guys do in the morning, and I really like what I see. But when you think about foreign correspondents, Charlie and Jeff, dashing good looks, way with words, and fearless. And Chris Lick was telling me this morning that he was one of the first to embrace this program in the building, that he said, if Charlie ever needs a substitute, I'm available. But Charlie never leaves. But I thought, I was very touched by that, Charlie, that he was so welcoming and so gracious to us.
He actually did substitute on the PBS program for me several times.
Yeah.
Every time I saw him around the building or at events, I just said, it's Bob Simon.
Yeah.
And I just tried to soak up everything that he said or everything he could share.
Tell us the story of your family, where you were telling them at dinner.
I was telling them my wife was pregnant. Actually, I was giving my parents this story just about a month and a half ago at a restaurant in New York, and I had this very big news to give them, and they just kept tugging at my arm, saying, "It's Bob Simon. It's Bob Simon." He was sitting right next to us at the table. All they wanted to do was meet Bob Simon. Yeah. So I introduced them, and it's a lovely moment.
So this day we honor Bob, and we think about his family.